Hey everyone, welcome back to the Burnett Breakdown, where I, Hunter Burnett, keep up with the news so that you don't have to. This week, I don't really know what I'm going to be talking about because I'm recording a little early, so we'll just kind of see where this takes us. All right, I'll start with some stuff I have written down. Again, I am recording this early, so I'm recording this Thursday night, the 28th. Typically, I wait till Friday night after I've had more time to consume the news, to read the news, to think about the news, and I really haven't had that much time this week to do any of that, and I can explain why that is a little bit later. So this will kind of be, a little bit more rambling, probably not as news heavy, but I still want to get a podcast out so I can get the habit of doing that, get it recorded and edited and all that. So that's where we are. So pardon the kind of weird format this week. I'll start with some stuff I did have written down that I didn't need to look too into, and that is the first is Mike Gallagher retiring or resigning from the House of Representatives. So he already announced that he was not going to run next in the next election cycle. He was not going to return to Congress, and he announced actually on Friday that he is going to resign on April 19th. He's not even going to finish out his term. And there's a couple of things that I wanted to say about this. The first is, just kind of generally speaking, I don't know the exact situation here. I don't know Mike Gallagher's exact situation here. But generally speaking, I don't like when congressmen don't finish out their terms. Again, unless something, happens, something family-related or something that is, forces them, and really in a real way, they need to and have to retire, health-related issues or something like that. But generally speaking, I don't like when congressmen don't finish out their terms simply because they don't want to be there anymore. I think you ran that you are going to represent these people for 2 years, for 6 years, however long it is, and I feel, in a sense, you are duty-bound. I do think that you said you would run, you would represent those people. The expectation was that you were going to represent them for a limited amount of time or for a set amount of time, and I think that you should hold up to your word. Again, I don't know the situation here. Maybe that's not the situation, so I don't want to delve too much on it, but that's just kind of my overall thoughts on people resigning early. The bigger deal here, and something that I think is just rampant right now in the Republican Party in particular, is the resigning or the leaving of Congress very competent and very serious politicians. What I mean by that is what I mean by very serious is politicians who actually have firm policy positions and believe firmly in policies that they want to actually accomplish and get done and get passed. Notice I said policies and not positions, okay? There's plenty of Congress people who have positions that they hold and hold firmly to those positions, but they're not concerned necessarily with policy, okay? Policy requires a ton of research, having really thought through some problems, and requires a serious conversation with other peoples to actually trying to accomplish something, okay? So if you think about a position, okay, I am pro-life. That's my position, okay? So I want to limit the number of abortions to hopefully one day 0, okay? And now, that is my position, and I can claim to be pro-life, and I am pro-life over and over and over again without doing anything, right? I can just hold that position. But in order to believe in a policy, I have to get a little bit more specific, okay? Do I believe in a 15-week ban? Do I believe in a 12-week ban? What about rape? What about incest, etc., okay? All those kind of nitty-gritty details are actual policies and policy concerns, and people who are concerned about policy and care about policy have to think about those things. As well, those people have to reach across the aisle sometimes and think, okay, where are my opponents at? Where am I? Where do I want to go? And how can I get there? How can I best get there? And it's going to be incremental. It's not going to be all of a sudden. But something most people who care about policy, something in the direction of where you want to go is better than nothing. Okay, so you're going to take what the other side is willing to give you, even if that means it's not as far as you would go or is not exactly what you want. Mike Gallagher is one of these people. He's very smart. He's very intelligent. He knows he has very strong conservative policy positions and very strong on things like international affairs, national defense. He's a China hawk. He headed the committee that dealt with and passed and wrote and worked on the TikTok bill and the forced divestment of TikTok. So he's a very serious person. And the Republican Party has been just wiped out of these serious, competent politicians who care about serious policy being passed. Mike Gallagher, Paul Ryan, years ago is a great example of this. And these people are, we need these people in the Republican Party, because what we have instead are a bunch of people who want to get on Fox News, who want to get on Newsmax, who wants to scream from the hilltop their positions and, how much they hate Democrats and how much they dislike the other side, and they would rather do that than actually get stuff done. Okay, so I care about getting stuff done. I don't care about what a politician gets on television and says they're going to do if they never get around to doing it. And in a lot of instances, if their actions are actually preventing them from actually accomplishing policy positions that they claim they want to accomplish. And so if you look at who is remaining in the Republican Party, okay, right now it's a bunch of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. Those people are unserious. Okay, they are people who are hanging on to power. Okay, they're not going to resign early. Why? Because it gives them exactly what they want. It gives them fame. It gives them recognition. It gives them airtime whenever they want it. They get in the news. Their name is out there. They get to scream from the hilltop that they're, fighting for you. Meanwhile, they don't actually accomplish anything. And this is a problem. This isn't. This problem of politicians who just want to get up on a stage and get on television and proclaim to the masses that they're fighting for you isn't just a problem in the Republican Party. I think you see it in the Democratic Party as well. I think people like Rashida Tlaib and AOC, these people are, basically the Democratic equivalent. But here's the thing. The Democratic Party, and whether you want to admit this, and most people who don't like the Democratic Party don't want to admit this because they disagree with the Democratic Party. And trust me, I disagree with the Democratic Party on a lot of stuff. But one thing that the Democratic Party it does significantly better than the Republican Party is be a competent party. Okay. Now, you can say that, well, look at Joe Biden. And yeah, Joe Biden should not be the Democratic candidate, but look at how he is in the position that he's in. In 2020, the Democratic Party had a bunch of people running, and a ton of people were running and trying to figure out which lane they were going to occupy, and you have Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders is kind of the populist Trump-esque politician in the Democratic Party. It's the politician who, if Bernie Sanders had won the Democratic nomination in 2020, probably wouldn't have beaten Donald Trump. Okay, the Democratic Party knew this, and instead of staying in the race and those politicians trying to win as many votes as possible and make a name for themselves, they all, if you remember, dropped out pretty simultaneously and all agreed to back Joe Biden. And what that did is that gave basically on a silver platter the nomination to Joe Biden. And you can complain that that's, corrupt. It's not corrupt, okay? It's the Democratic Party, this establishment, this entity that cares about its existence and its health. They were deciding this is our best opportunity to beat Donald Trump. So this guy, love him, hate him, doesn't really matter. This guy is our best shot. So we need to get behind him. And they did that, okay? So the Democratic Party is much more competent when it comes to party politics. Not only that, but if you look at the median age of retirement, the median age of Republicans retiring is significantly younger than Democrats. So you have a lot of Democrats retiring, but guess what? They're all older. They're all, near retirement or in retirement age. Right now in the Republican Party, you have people like Mike Gallagher. He's young. He should be the face of the party. And he is just going to resign instead. Why? Because right now, from basically all the reporting from even the outside, Congress, and particularly the House of Representatives, seems to be a terrible place to be if you're actually a serious person who wants to do things that improve the lives of Americans. And we can say, well, that's because the swamp. It's not because of the swamp. I don't know what the swamp has to do with any of this. Okay, we're draining the swamp, and guess what? Okay, the quote unquote draining the swamp by all these MAGAites and MAGA Republicans getting in there, and guess what we have? A bunch of getting nothing done. Right? Because it turns out that policy is a lot harder than getting on TV and yelling what you think the country should do. You actually have to work with people. And here's the craziest thing is because there's this entrenchment, and I've written about this in the past. I think this is largely the result of the primary system. Okay, the primary system incentivizes people who have the strongest views, people who can rile up the base the most, people who are angriest and can get you, the voter, angry and the angriest, and so that you go out and vote for them. The people who have the most staunch and loyal supporters, even if it's not a majority. Okay, because that's the thing about these primaries is you can win a plurality and it not be a majority. You can win with, like Donald Trump did in 2016, with less than 50% of total Republicans voting for you, but you won a plurality. So, and because of the way that the districts have been set up, once you win the nomination for your party, you basically have that seat. So, for example, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she is in a very, very, one of the reddest districts in all of the country. So all she has to do is worry about winning the Republican nomination. She doesn't have to worry about winning the general election. She just has to worry about winning the Republican primary. So what is she going to do? She's going to make sure that no one is more Republican, no one is more to the right of her. Okay, so how can you be to the as far right, and I don't mean that in a kind of pejorative, I just mean kind of, take as far right of positions as you can. How can you ensure that no one outflanks you to your right? You never compromise. Not once. You never compromise. Because as soon as you compromise, as soon as you work with the other side, with Democrats, guess what? Now you're squished. Now you're a rhino, and someone can run on that. And someone can say, I wouldn't have given in there. I wouldn't have done that. And so it incentivizes, because of the primaries, and all you have to do is win your primary, it incentivizes people to cater to their base and never compromise. But here is the issue with that. That's not how our system is designed to set up. It's not how our system is designed to work. It's not how it was set up. Our system was meant to incentivize compromise, incentivize people working together to accomplish things that matter. It wasn't meant for one side or one party or one system of beliefs to just run and trample over the rest of the country. There's a reason why our founding fathers set up, and the framers of the Constitution set up the system the way that they did. And our system cannot work if we have people who refuse to compromise. And so what you have with the primary system is people run to far right and the far left. It's happening on both sides. Okay, it's not just a Republican Party thing. It's a primary. It's a party primary system thing. And so you run to the extremes. You run to as far to the left or to the right as you can, so that no one outflanks you, and then you don't compromise. And as a result, you get these crazy politicians who don't compromise. Rather than, and I think, and again, this sounds corrupt. It sounds like, I just want the swamp, or quote, these power brokers in Washington to control everything. But I think we should eliminate the primary system, and the parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, should just tell us who their candidate is. The thing about the primary system is it didn't come about until 68. Okay, or 1960, or 65, or it's in the 60s. Like, this is a very recent occurrence. For the majority of the history of this country, the parties simply told you who their candidate was. Their delegates got together, got in a room, and they voted on who their candidate was. And that sounds swampy, it sounds secretive, it sounds corrupt to us now. But how is our primary system any better when we're incentivizing people who don't want to actually accomplish anything? The thing about when the party decides who is going to run and who their candidate is, the party then has an incentive not to ruin their brand, right? Because they want to win power, and they want to make sure that the people that they are appointing, that they are nominating to run for office, win. And the way that they can do that is to make sure that their brand nationally is not ruined. And so a Marjorie Taylor Greene ruins the Republican brand. An AOC ruins the Democratic brand. And if it were up to the parties, especially because those are safe districts, they don't have to worry about, a Democrat winning Marjorie Taylor Greene's district. So what they would do is not elect and not nominate and not choose someone who's crazy like Marjorie Taylor Greene is, because by not doing that, they're not ruining the brand. And so it's incentivizing the party when they get to pick their own candidates. It's incentivizing the party to protect the party brand. And that's important because now what you have is a bunch of politicians who don't care about the party brand, who don't care about any institution. Okay, and that's what the party is. It's an institution. Don't care about any institutions. All they care about is themselves. And all that they need to focus on are themselves. Because as long as they can get their brand out there, as long as they can get their face on TV, as long as they can get their name out there, they'll continue to win election. They'll continue to stay in power. It doesn't matter whatsoever. The good of the country, the good of the party, nothing. All they have to care about is themselves. And a system that incentivizes selfishness like that isn't a system that is sustainable. And so I think the parties, we should eliminate the primary system, and the parties should choose who is running for them. And then guess what? I can decide whether I want to vote for that person or not. It's not a guarantee. It's not forcing you to vote for that person. It's simply saying, this is who us, the Republican Party, is going to run. You can vote for them or not. And guess what? If enough Republicans sit out an election because they don't like the Republican candidate that the party nominated, the Democrat's going to win. And guess what that incentivizes next time around? A better candidate. And so you can still have this accountability, and that the people can still have a say. But what the people's say, so to speak, is filtered through the party. And that actually is a better system. Again, we live in this ultra-democratic, this ultra, the power to the people time in history. And I just think power to the people is really good sometimes. And then other times, it's really not good. And right now, I think we're in a situation where it's really not good. And by the way, we're the only Western democratic country that the party doesn't choose its candidates, but the people choose the party's candidates. Okay, we're the only country in the Western democratic sphere to do that. And so I think it's something we need to reevaluate. And I think Mike Gallagher, a serious politician, Paul Ryan, a serious politician, these are people who should be the poster childs of the party. That should be they are the future of the party. And they're retiring, they're resigning, they're leaving because they would rather be anywhere else, because we're incentivizing bad behavior, and we need to disincentivize bad behavior. And right now, our system is simply not doing that. All right, moving on to the Baltimore Bridge collapse. I don't really have much to say about this other than it is obviously a tragedy. The video was terrifying to see. So if you, I don't know if you haven't seen it, I don't know how, but a container ship, cargo ship, hit the Francis Scott Key Bridge that crosses the Baltimore Harbor, and basically the whole section that it hit collapsed. Fortunately it happened at about 1:30 in the morning, so hardly anybody was on the roads. It wasn't super busy at the time, and right now there are 6 people who are presumed dead, and those 6 people were largely construction workers. I think 8 were on the bridge at the time, and they were able to rescue 2 of them. And this was obviously terrifying, but it actually could have been significantly worse. So basically, from what I've gathered, what happened is the ship had some mechanical issues, some technical issues. It was losing power, losing control, etc. And they were actually able to issue a mayday. They were able to issue an emergency signal, and what that allowed is for people to stop traffic onto the bridge. And so I read somewhere that it was like 2 minutes from the Mayday call to it hitting and the bridge collapsing. And in that time, some people were able to stop people from getting on the bridge, which meant that those people weren't on the bridge when it collapsed. There's, fewer people on the bridge. So that is very, very fortunate. So as scary as it was, it actually could have been much worse. I have seen people on social media just going crazy about, conspiracy theories of this was not an accident, this was on purpose, and then they'll give their reasons. I saw one person who basically said the FBI said it's an accident, the CIA said it's an accident, Biden administration said it's an accident, the mayor said it's an accident, the governor said it's an accident, so therefore I know it's not an accident. If I wasn't convinced before, now I am. It wasn't an accident. That kind of thinking is so dumb. Okay? To be contrarian, simply to be contrarian, is so dumb. There's no reason to basically just say, that's what everyone else is saying that I don't like, I'm going to say the opposite. That kind of thinking leads to really bad positions, policies, and views for yourself. Because what happens when someone you don't like, when someone you disagree with, actually makes a good point, or has a good idea, or is right about something? If you're simply playing contrarian, then you are not going to recognize that as right, and you're going to then do the opposite, which turns out is not right, or is wrong, or is bad. And that's no way to live. And not only that, but you feel like, I'm thinking for myself, I'm doing my own research, but it turns out you're just letting the government say what they believe or whoever you oppose say what they believe, and you're going to do the opposite. So they're still controlling what you think because you're just going to say the opposite. So that kind of thinking, I think, is so childish. It's contrarian for contrarian's sake is dumb. There's reasons to be contrarian. There's reasons to be suspicious. There's reasons to question. Absolutely. But the point of those questions, the point of being contrarian, the point of thinking for yourself is to think about things that are good and true and beautiful, and then to advocate for those things, and then to live those things out. And so you actually have to think, what is good? What is true? What is beautiful? And how can I live a life that is reflective of those things? Well, you can't do that if your simple thinking is contrarian. Do the opposite. Oh, the left doesn't like something? I love that thing. Okay, well, what if the left doesn't like, Nazis? Are you going to like Nazis now? That's a bad idea. What if the left really likes, capitalism? Are you going to be a socialist now? Like, this level of thinking is so dumb. And it kind of entrenches tribal behavior. But really, at the end of the day, it's just childish. It's just childish. And so I don't see why something like this, that is in every way imaginable an accident, why the immediate reaction is it can't be an accident because they said so. Okay, that kind of conspiracy level thinking, it's just childish. That's what it is. And of course they'll say, but the conspiracy theorists have been, batting 100 or batting 1,000. They've been right every time. No, they haven't. You're just, pointing to specific examples, things like COVID, okay, and you're saying, see, we were right then, so therefore we're right all the time. Again, that's dumb. Just because you were right then doesn't mean that taking the contrarian position all the time will lead to right results. Okay? You need to have a little bit more sophisticated level of thinking. So, if you start to see some conspiracy theorist nonsense about this, I would just ignore it. And again, unless there's actual evidence, okay? So many conspiracy theories are bits and pieces of, well, this is a little odd or this is strange, and so therefore the conclusion is this wasn't an accident. No, that's dumb. Okay, let's look at actual substantial evidence, not this is a little fishy. Yeah, it may be a little fishy. That we should ask questions. We should investigate, as there will be, and then we can draw conclusions. Let's not just say it's probably not an accident because everyone's saying it is. Now, that's really all I had on the rundown, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about, why I didn't have much time to prepare this week and why I'm recording early. So this week, I am going down to Georgia. So for those who don't know, I live in Louisville, Kentucky now, and I'm driving tomorrow night after work to hang out with my old college roommates, and we are going to do what we do every year. It's our fourth meeting where we meet and we pitch stocks, okay? So my roommates in college, they were, two of the three roommates were finance majors. They loved the stock market. They really not introduced me to the stock market, but they were kind of the first people I talked about who really, found it interesting and knew a lot about it. And so as we lived together, we talked a ton about finance, a ton about stocks. We would, talk about stocks we liked, didn't like, all sorts of different stuff. And so when we graduated college, we decided to meet and pitch one stock a year. So each of us brings a stock, and we talk about that stock, and we pitch that stock. We say why we think it's a buy, why it's should be bought by the others, and then the others have to vote basically, and they say, "Yep, that works." No, there hasn't been a stock that's been vetoed yet, and we pitch, and everyone buys that stock, and then we track our performance. And so we have in spreadsheets, we have the performance of the stocks, and we evaluate that stock. The stock picks for the year. And the time frame in which we're thinking about these stocks is actually 5 years. So we will not sell, quote unquote, sell a stock for 5 years. And so when we're thinking about what kind of stock to pitch, it's got to be a stock that you think is going to grow and be a good, solid company for at least 5 years, because we're not looking at short-term performance. And so once we reach that 5-year mark, we're in year 4 now. So once we reach the 5-year mark, where it's been 5 years since our first stocks, then we'll start to evaluate over the course of the 5 years, the stock that performed the worst over those 5 years, that person who pitched that stock, it has to buy everyone else dinner. Because we haven't done it for 5 years, we are using 1-year metrics at this point. So, for example, last year, not this past year stock, but the one before that, at our last meeting, I had to buy everyone lunch because my stock performed the worst. So it's a great time. It's really interesting. So this week I've been researching what stock I was going to pitch, and it is nice. The stock pitching is fun. It's something we're interested in, but it's also really great to see some of my best friends at least once a year. We will see each other throughout the year, occasionally, but really this kind of every year. It's this weekend, the first weekend of April. So April 1st is kind of our date that we shoot for. So we're meeting a little early this year, but our calendars on this weekend every year we're doing this, and this is actually something that I just would encourage anyone and everyone to do, especially men. I mean, right now, you just see so much research and hear so many stories about men and their loneliness, especially men in their 20s. And these are young men who should be, thriving. Okay, they're in their prime working age, and they're just depressed in so many instances. Their suicide rates have skyrocketed. But especially deaths of despair. So that's things including suicide, but also alcohol-related deaths of overdose and drug abuse, things like that. And men are just struggling right now. And I think one of the major reasons why they're so lonely is they don't do stuff like this. Men are just not as willing to reach out to others. They're not as willing to plan, events and hangouts with their friends. That's much more of a female thing traditionally, and just I think biologically, and just because of that, they just don't do stuff like this. And so I would encourage especially men out there, find whoever your group of friends are, plan once a year we're going to get together and do something. Don't just get together and hang out. Men need to be doing something. There's a ton of research showing that if you have men just sit and talk, that they don't really talk about much. But as soon as you have them do something, all of a sudden they're sharing everything about themselves. So there's been a ton of groups that men will get together and fix something. And it turns out when you do that, they'll get to know each other much better. For whatever reason, that's how men are. And so do something, go on a hike, go on a camping trip, go on, do something like, stock pitch or, whatever it is, go do something like that. I just think it's something that adds so much value to life. And so, this week I'm busting my butt researching the stock. I've stayed up late multiple nights now researching the stock. And, at the end of the day, is it, really going to bear any fruit in terms of I'll make a ton of money off the stock? I doubt it, right? I'm not that great at pitching stocks. I don't really know all that much about finance, at least not as much as I'd like to know. And yet, it will absolutely have been worth it to put in the work and then to just go and do it. And so this is something that I love doing it every year. I hope we never stop doing it. And it's something that really does add a tremendous amount of value to life. And again, it is something that is inconvenient, right? I'm going to have to drive 8 hours after work, get there probably midnight, if not later. And so it's very inconvenient. And yet it's something that is absolutely worth doing. And I know as soon as I get there, and as soon as we go through the competition, I know that I'll be glad that I did it. And so, that's something that I really encourage. And that kind of leads me to, as I'm thinking about, and just kind of, talking off the cuff here, as I'm thinking about the situation that men face, that, the deaths of despair, the depression that a lot of men are dealing with. And another thing that I heard one time that is just a very practical thing like this, do something once a year. Arthur Brooks he was president of American Enterprise Institute, I think at one point. Now I believe he's at Harvard doing something there. I think he runs an organization as well. But, one thing that he said is always say yes to and always attend weddings and funerals. Always attend weddings and funerals. And he said they're always inconvenient. Always. They're always inconvenient. No one ever really wants to stop what they're doing and miss out on whatever they had planned to go to a wedding, especially one that's not, someone really close, or go to a funeral. And yet, by doing that, it turns out that it's really great. And, it's an interesting thing about why those two things. Wedding, it's just the beginning of something, right? It's the beginning of a new life, a couple's new life together. It's something that I think, especially a Christian wedding, I don't think there are very few things more beautiful this side of eternity than a beautiful Christian wedding. Than a Christian wedding where the husband or the groom and the bride, that they just love Christ You know that they are committed to Christ, and you know that their marriage is going to be one rooted and oriented in Christ. And to see them say to one another these vows that go way back, they're vows that probably their parents said. These vows of no matter what happens, right? No matter if you are sick or we're the healthiest couple ever, no matter if we're the richest couple ever or if we are the poorest couple ever, no matter the hard times we go through, no matter the good times we go through, no matter that, I commit myself to you. And to see the groom say that and to see the bride say that, that is beautiful. And when even if you don't really even know the groom and the bride, it is a beautiful thing to see. And so it's this new beginning, this beautiful moment. And as humans, we are created and designed and wired to love moments like that. Again, those are things that make life worth living. Not how much money can you make, right? Not, go off and be the most successful businessman ever. There is a lot of value in that, but there's so much more value in maybe I can take this day off and go to this event. Maybe I'll spend the money. Maybe I'll miss out on something else I wanted to do, because I just find that most of the time, once you get there, it's worth it. And funerals. It's interesting that he says funerals, but I think he's got a really solid point there. Funerals is kind of the opposite of weddings, right? It's the bookend. It's the end of something. It's sad. It's, and you think, well, why would you want to go to a funeral? No one wants to go to a funeral, right? Especially not like, they could be excited to go to a wedding. No one's excited to go to the funeral, but why are they worth going to? I think they're worth going to because they make you contemplate an existential question, but what is the meaning of life? Why are we here? Make you reconsider and think about just how short life is. And how are we spending that time? Those are questions that we tend to avoid and we want to avoid. In a lot of ways, we distract ourselves so we don't have to answer those questions or think about those questions. And they kind of smack you in the face at a funeral. And so, again, not something that anyone really wants to go to, and yet something that I think are absolutely worth going to. And these are two things that, since he said that, I've really tried to implement. Fortunately, knock on wood and Lord willing, I haven't had to go to many funerals. But there have been many weddings, at least a few weddings, that I have not necessarily wanted to go to. And yet I knew this. I knew what Arthur Brooks had said. And I knew that, in a lot of ways, he's right. We should go to these things. And even though my wife and I knew no one, even though we were just basically going to talk to ourselves, and even if we didn't really even know the groom and the bride that well, we went, committed to it, sacrificed what we needed to sacrifice to do it, and every time it was worth it. Every time it was worth it. And so I think these are, I don't really know how I got here. I guess I was thinking about, men in despair. And I think this is an antidote to that. Again, is it going to solve everything? No. And, Jordan Peterson talks about cleaning your room. And I have mixed feelings on Jordan Peterson. But, and people kind of laugh, like, how is cleaning your room going to solve the world? Like, no one's claiming it's going to solve the world, right? But it's a start, right? Going to a funeral or wedding, is it going to make your life fulfilling and happy? No, not one time. Of course not. But it's a start. It's better than the alternative. And so I think that is completely worth doing. And thinking of ways, not just in weddings, not just funerals, but all sorts of things that seem not that big of a deal, that seem insignificant, that seem not really going to make much of a difference. No, they probably will. And I think they're worth considering. I don't really know what else to talk about. Let's see. I guess I got some new books this week that I can talk about. I ordered Shelby Foote's Civil War trilogy. It is massive. It is, I think, the first volume was something like 800 to 1,000 pages, something like that, and there's 3 of them. The reason I got it is because there's a guy that I watch on YouTube, Dr. Harrelson, Alan Harrelson, I think is his name. He does the Pipe Cottage, and he mentioned he's well versed in the American South, and he has mentioned the series as being one of the most important, or or one of the best recountings and histories of the Civil War. This is something I was actually talking about with some coworkers today. I don't know as much about the Civil War as I'd like to, but I wish that I knew more about particularly Southern history, and that's because I'm from Georgia, and it's part of the South. But I think we need more local history. We need to teach more local history. We need to know more local history. And by local, what I mean is exactly what I mean, what I said. I think you can start as local as your family history. As much as you can, know your family history. And then know the history of your small little town, right? Or your big city. Know that history. Know the important people. Know the people who once were really significant, really influential. Maybe who the street names were named after, right? And then expand that out to your state history. And then expand that out to your regional history. And then your United States history, right? Your country's history. And I do think, obviously, I work in classical education. I love classical education. And so I think you do still need the classical cultures, right? Rome and Greece. And so I'm not saying don't study all of that, but I do think there's so much value in learning local history. And the reason why I say that is I think, traditionally, and I actually think it fits really well with classical education, is traditionally you didn't need to sit in a classroom to learn about your local history. You heard about it, right? You didn't have Netflix to distract you. You didn't have, you weren't moving, right? So you didn't, graduate high school and go to college in a different city and then get a job at a different city and then you never return home. No, you lived at home. You lived in the community and you were born there and you were raised there and you lived there, you worked there, and you probably died there. And all of your family was the same way. And so you had all this family around you telling you the stories of your past, of your family's past, the story of significant events that had happened in the city's history, the significant people in the city's history, in the country's history. And so you didn't need a school to sit there and tell these things. You didn't need a textbook to teach you these things because you had it. You had these stories. But as we've become more mobile, as people have become less attached to where they come from, and they leave, and they live apart from extended family, you don't get these stories. You don't get these memories. And so what I think that does is I think that's really detrimental to us as people, and particularly to us as a culture. Because what learning local history does is it provides a sense of belonging, but also a sense of care about the place that you are. It turns out that people who care about where they are or where they come from know a lot about it. And part of that is because they care, they want to learn about it. But also, I think the relationship works as the other way. If you learn more about somewhere, about where you are, you care more about it. You like being there. You feel like that's home, and you want to take care of home. And so if we think about this broadly in terms of culture, and obviously culture and politics are tightly related, local history, if we cared more about where we lived, then, and by what I mean by that is not just the country, but the literal city and state that you live, if we cared more about that, and that was where our priorities lie and our real affections lie, then we wouldn't want to just export everything to the federal government. Why does California care about how people in Georgia live? Now, there's obviously exceptions to this, race being a major one, right? When there are human rights being violated, I do think, outsiders do need to care. And I think that applies to us. We need to care when other groups and people and cultures, when they violate human rights. I think we have, we can't sit idly by. But when civil rights and human rights aren't being violated, why does people in California care what people in Georgia do? At the same time, why do people in Georgia care about what people in California are doing? Why do people in Georgia care about the California tax rates? They can think it's a bad idea, but that doesn't, then just don't adopt it, right? But why do both groups run to Washington, D.C. to try to make the other side live like they want them to live? Because we don't care about where we come from. And so we see everything as a national issue. Everyone has to have an opinion on Ron DeSantis. Everyone has to have an opinion on Gavin Newsom. Everyone has to have an opinion on the local school district and what they're teaching and what they're not teaching, even though that local school district is across the country. We all have to have an opinion, and yet it doesn't impact us. It doesn't affect us. But that's because we don't care, right? We don't care about our community. If you really cared about your community, you would see your community has a lot of issues. And if you really cared about your community, and you really cared about those issues, you'd want to solve those issues. But when you're solving those issues that in your community that really matter, your time is going to be consumed by solving those problems, or at least helping to solve those problems, or at least attempting to solve their problems, or at least advocating for those problems to be solved, or running for office, on the city board to fix those problems, and then think about, how to fix it. I mean, all of this is really time-consuming, and it requires a lot of sacrifice. So if you really cared, you'd be willing to do that. But we don't actually care about our communities. So instead, what we do is we go home, we watch TikTok, we watch cable news, we watch the TV, we watch YouTube, we read the news, and that's really easy. Because all we have to do is sit there and form our own opinions. And we think and we act as if that's caring. We act like because we know what Tucker Carlson most recently said, or what Rachel Maddow said on, TV, what Elon Musk or Ben Shapiro or Candace Owens or me, for that matter, the few people that do, you know what they think, you know what they say, and you have thoughts about what they said, and that is supposedly being involved and being a knowledgeable citizen. No, that's not really caring. That's easy, is what that is. It's hard to do the dirty work of identifying problems in your own community and then figuring out ways to solve and taking the time to solve those problems. But imagine if everyone did that. Imagine if everyone cared about their own community's problems before the problems of the country. Guess what would happen? The country problems, a lot of them would be solved. There would be some issues, national defense. Those would be issues that the federal government would still have to resolve. But a whole lot of other issues wouldn't be really that much of a concern. What if you were worried about the homelessness in your own community, the poor in your own community, and not the poor in, the state across the country from you, or the poor as an abstract thing that you don't really know anyone that's poor? What if you cared about the poor in your own church? What if you did that? Then you take care of them. And if people did that broadly, the government wouldn't have to take care of the poor. And we can get as local as family. Care about your family. Start a family. Be a really responsible person. Become a really responsible person. Because it turns out most of us aren't. So become a really responsible person who can provide for their family, who can support their family, who can be a caring person in their family. And if people did that across the country, a lot of our problems would be solved. But again, I think a lot of this comes down to we don't know who we are anymore or where we come from. So local history is so important, right? I think, I started talking about the Civil War books that I got. But I think the Civil War books that I think one of the reasons I got them is I hope to learn a lot about Georgia in them. I hope to learn a lot about Battle of Chickamauga, for example, or Sherman's March to the Sea, or the role that the city of Atlanta played in the Confederacy and the Confederate war effort. Do I want to learn those things because I love the Confederacy? No. But I want to learn those things because they are part of the history of where I come from. And I want to care about where I come from, and I won't care about where I come from if I don't know anything about it. So, another thing, I'd just highly encourage anyone, go read about your state's history. Start with your state, okay? I would prefer local community, but state history is usually easier to, find because it's, a little easy, more accessible. Go get a book on your state's history and just read it and learn about your state. And what you'll find, and I'm probably a little biased because I taught Georgia history for years, is what you'll find is as you teach that subject, or not teach, but as you learn that subject, And as you learn more about the state's history that you live in, you'll want to learn more and more and more and more. And part of that's because you'll know things that you never knew. For example, you'll know why the street name is what it is. You'll know why the county's named what it is. You'll know why the government functions the way that it does. You'll learn about the peculiarities and the oddities about your state that make it different than other states. For example, one of the kind of weird exceptions in Georgia is the governor doesn't have pardon power. It has no pardon power. So the governor can't just pardon someone. Rather, it's a board of pardons and parole that does that in Georgia. And there's a history to that. And there's a reason why that is. And so, learning about your local history makes you care about the place that you are. So start with your state's history. Highly encourage it. And I really do. I really, really do think if more people did that this country would be a better place. I'm a conservative because I believe in the idea of federalism and the idea that the problems closest to you are the problems that you can address and that you care to address, that we should be concerned with those things closest to us that we have the most control over and the most influence and responsibility over before we start to care about things that we can't control, we have less control over. We need to be more concerned about our community than our state, and then our state we need to be more concerned about than the federal government. And then we need to be more concerned about our country than the UN, and then we need etc. And so I think this is one of the major reasons why I am a conservative. And I think not only is that better in the sense that it's better for us because we're not kind of dishing out the responsibility to others, right? It is more meaningful when you get your hands dirty and get involved in your community and you get the hard work done of solving problems. That's going to be really fulfilling. It's going to be really meaningful. Casting a vote and hoping someone else doesn't that someone else does it in Washington, that's not very meaningful. And so I really do think not only is it good for us, but I also think it's practical. I can solve the problems closest to me better than someone who lives across the country from me, who I've never met, who has never been to my community. I can solve the problems better in my community than they can. It's practical. And so we need to take that into account. I don't know how long I've been going. Looks like I've been going for about 45 minutes. That we'll kind of wrap it up there. So, I know this was a meandering, rambling podcast, a little bit different than normal. But thanks for listening if you did. Thanks for watching if you did, and especially if you made it to the end. Please like, subscribe, share, do whatever you can to make this podcast go far and wide. And I hope that you will return again next week.